Going to reconvene the meeting. Next item on the agenda is going to be a presentation by Coastal Planning Engineering, our friend Ken Wilson. Ken? Been here before.
A couple times. Usually in the winter when it's cold like it is today. It's cold everywhere in North Carolina today, so it doesn't matter if we're in Wilmington or here. All right, well, thanks a lot. I appreciate being back up here. Give everybody an update on the project. Behind the scenes, I've been working with Chris and the mayor. They're included in the quarterly coordination meetings between the county and the other two towns that are involved with the Dare County three-town beach nourishment project. So there's been a lot of coordination behind the scenes, but this is a good opportunity to brief the town on everything that's been going on up to this point in time and talk a little bit about how we move forward all the way up to construction. So we've got a few slides here today. This is a slide that I believe is probably in the packet that's gone out about some of the MSD information, but it's basically an overview of the three different projects that are included in the all-in-one three Dare County Town project. Obviously Duck up there on the north end. And then it also shows those borrow areas. Over the summer of last year, we finished our borrow area investigations. We did 2 different geophysical surveys out there and a pretty long stint, about a month long, of taking vibrocores in both of those areas. So those are kind of the finished products that we have right now for the borrow areas, and I've got some more detailed slides I'll show you here in just a second. This is an overview of the Duck project. So we're looking at a main fill placement area of 7,980 feet that runs from the southern boundary of the southernmost oceanfront developed lot, just adjacent to the field research facility, and it runs up to I believe 140. Yeah, it runs up to 140 Skimmer Way. So that there's been some discussion about how we came up with that magical number. In a nutshell, basically, it's all based on that storm damage analysis that we used the S-Beach model for. So we created this impact line based on the S-Beach model, and basically wherever those houses are that are impacted by that kind of dictated where we wanted to cut the project off, or where we could justify the need for the project. These models aren't, we can't get into the, to where that line is by the foot. So we allow for a little bit of a safety factor there. So we basically put a 15-foot buffer on that line, and that got us basically up to that house at 140 Skimmer Way. So that sort of angled slope down, that purple line represents where the taper would be. So we'll construct a tapered edge of the beach fill going north from there for about 500 feet. This is the southern end. So what you can see here is this is an older Google Earth image. I believe there's a house now built on that southernmost lot. But it shows basically the end of the rectangle there, if you will, is the end of the main fill section, and the triangle represents where we would propose to put that taper area. Now, in the last couple of weeks, maybe last month or so, we've had some discussions with the field research facility, and they actually have a piece of equipment up here in the dune. Oh, come back. They have a piece of equipment. Do it again. Sir. Okay. Well, anyway, pretty close to where the point of that angle is. There's a piece of equipment up in the dune, and they've got some fiber optic cables that run out into the ocean across their beach there. And they're concerned about construction traffic in that area, bulldozers and loaders and things like that in that area, and the possibility of damaging that. So at this point in time, I think they're going to run some of their own models to look at the spreading of that material in that section. And what we may end up doing was that slide that kept jumping on me. We may end up just taking that taper material and overfilling the southern boundary of the project. So basically, Mother Nature is going to taper that material out. It's going to spread it both north and south, and we'll end up with a taper, at the end of the day. And I think the FRF staff's a little bit more open to the idea of some of their equipment possibly getting covered naturally rather than having bulldozers running over their equipment and placing that material. So if in fact they're not going to allow us access to directly place material on their property, this is probably the way that we'll go with that design. This is the design template that we've been talking about. So once the project is constructed, basically when we went through this storm damage analysis, running those models, this is the design that the model tells us that we want to build to get that level of protection through the project area, using that design storm of the Hurricane Isabel storm. So what it looks like is a dune. We'll make some improvements to the existing dune out there so that we achieve a dune that's at elevation 20 feet with a 20-foot wide crest at the top of that. There'll be a 5-on-1 slope down the side of that, and then where that toes in, we'll have something between a 65, I think it's actually a 60 to 65 foot wide dry beach in front of that dune. And again, this is the design. So in order to achieve that design, we'll actually put additional fill out there that will cover what we predict the erosion would be over a 5-year renourishment period. So that's really, theoretically, that's what the design should look like at the end of the renourishment period, at the end of 5 years. That's the design that's in place. And then at the end of that 5 years, you don't have to rebuild that. You're basically just putting that additional sacrificial sand out in front of that design. So usually that initial construction, that first build out of the project is a much more substantial project. After that, you're basically just putting back the sacrificial fill that you lose over time. We'll move through these quickly, but I wanted to show you just so your understanding of the other two projects that we've kind of teamed up with here. This is the Kitty Hawk project. It extends along the entire town limits of Kitty Hawk. It's about 18,900 feet long. There's a 1,000-foot taper on either end of this project. Most likely they won't need the southern taper because it'll tow into the Kill Devil Hills project, which covers their northern shoreline. Excuse me. The design for Kitty Hawk is a little bit different because they start out in such a precarious place where they actually have a whole lot of houses out on their beach in front of their dune. Primarily what we're talking about building there is a berm-only project, a 60-foot wide berm. And what we're looking at doing is putting some starter dunes in areas where we can put some additional fill in front of those houses, and then putting a lot of sand fencing up on that dune to start building up a dune in front of those houses out there. The focus for Kitty Hawk was a little bit different than it was for the Duck and the Kill Devil Hills project. Kill Devil Hills and the Duck project, we're primarily looking at storm damage reduction. We're using that S-Beach model to prevent oceanfront damages. In Kitty Hawk, the design is really to lower the level of wave run-up and water run-up to reduce the amount of flooding that they're having into the road and then into that area between Highway 12 and Highway 138. All right. This is the Kill Devil Hills design. Again, this is not the entire town of Kill Devil Hills. It's basically the northern 2.5 miles. It's 12,588 feet. And again, we've got tapers on either end of that. And as I said previously, we probably won't be needing the northern taper because that's the cutoff at Kitty Hawk, and we'll pick up with their project once we get into Kitty Hawk. Their design is a little bit different. It's a little bit scaled back from the one that we're proposing for Duck, but it's similar. It's a 15-foot high dune at elevation 20 and a 40-foot wide berm in front of that. This is a table that we've been using for these three towns meetings that we've been having fairly regularly, but it basically provides the total volume there, the project lengths. It's got all the specifications of the actual design. So this presentation should be available on the website afterwards. So I'm going to go through every one of those numbers. Going back to the borrow areas, this is just an overview shot. I'm going to look at that borrow area A first, and then I'll look at borrow area C after that. This is borrow area A, the larger shape that's colored in with a colored bathymetry. That's the original survey area that we started looking at back in probably June of this past summer. We conducted our geophysical survey through that entire area, some reconnaissance surveys, and then we went in and we took vibrocores in those areas that looked the most promising. We used those vibrocores to develop an area that we thought we would end up finally trying to permit, and then that area is the area that we covered in the second geophysical survey that was conducted back in September and October. So this is the final shape. That black outline is the final line work for the borrow area that we've submitted for a permit. And each one of those individual polygons inside that black line work is basically a different elevation that the dredge could actually dig down to. So in one of those blocks, the dredge might only be able to dig down to 45 feet. In another block, maybe they could dig down to 50 feet. So that's why we have different blocks within the borrow area. This is the borrow area C, that's about 4 miles offshore, between 3 and 4 miles offshore of Duck. That orange line that runs through the middle of the map is actually the 3-mile line offshore. This area has a little bit finer grain size sand than what's in that borrow area A. Borrow area A, I believe, has about 16 million cubic yards of sand. It's more than enough to do all 3 projects. This borrow area has about 2.5 million cubic yards, which is enough to do the Duck project. But we're still looking into, we're applying for a permit for this borrow area. It meets the state sediment criteria. We're still doing some additional evaluation to see, how well that material is going to stack up, being is that it's a little finer grain than the material in borrow area A. We want to make sure that we feel like we can achieve that design if we were to use that finer material, or if it's better off to just use that borrow area A material. It obviously costs a little bit more, but all of our estimates at this point in time, all our cost estimates have assumed that the sand will come from borrow area A. So if in fact we can use borrow area C, it would be a reduction of the current cost estimates. So at this point in time, we've pretty well developed all the environmental documentation. We've submitted that for reviews. We've developed all the geotechnical information. The designs are complete. All of that's basically been submitted for review. And at this point, we're starting to move into what we're calling the pre-construction phase. So the pre-construction phase has a couple different aspects. One of which would be the development of project plans and specifications, basically the bidding documents that we would put out on the street and advertise for contractors to bid on. As part of that, we'll be doing new design surveys. We'll be doing new beach profile surveys of all 3 of the projects. I also talked to Chris just a short time ago, and at the same time we do that, most likely we'll survey the entire town of Duck, even though the project area is a smaller area. The idea is to continue to monitor the entire shoreline of Duck so that we can keep track of the erosion rates over time and continue to basically have an understanding of where the rest of the town sits as far as a need for a project in the future. That would also include bidding coordination, bid assist. Going back up to that indented second bullet, the borrow area refinement. During this phase is where we'll look at the actual borrow areas. I talked about looking into borrow area C a little bit more, doing some additional analysis to see if we feel comfortable using that material and being able to achieve the design purpose of the project. Bidding coordination and bid assessment, contract negotiations. As obviously during the bid, there'll be questions from the contractors coming back. We'll assist the town in answering those questions. Once we get bids back, we'll help assess those bids, provide feedback, and then contract negotiations. If in fact the bids come in higher than expected, there'll be some back and forth trying to negotiate a fair project that everybody can be pleased with. Project management, there'll be additional meetings throughout the next year, the 3 towns coordination meetings, some individual meetings with towns such as this one, and then pre-construction coordination. Right now the schedule has us at getting contracts in place probably sometime around January, maybe into February, but there'll be a lag of time between the time the contract is awarded to the time they actually start construction, that there'll probably be some additional coordination involved through that period of time. Chris may have spoken to you about this already. Right now, there are a number of things that the towns and the county have to work together with. All of those things that were on that last slide I just talked about, the pre-construction phase, that's going to be one contract for all three towns that's going to go directly to the county. So the county, CP&E will contract with the county to do that work. And in the background, the towns and the county are working on a memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding so that everyone understands through this process, through the pre-construction, the actual construction, following construction, what everyone's roles and responsibilities are as far as paying back, any money that was lent or coordination during construction, whose responsibility is it when things come up. So the towns and the county are working on this. I've got some pictures of a project that's currently under construction right now down south in North Topsail Beach. Just a little bit of discussion Chris and I have been having about the staging area. One of the things that the contractor will need is access to the beach to move pipes and to move heavy equipment and things out onto the beach to actually do the construction. So we've talked about different access points along the beach and possible concepts. The front runner, I guess, for this would be to try to use the northern end of the FRF property to try to gain access. But I've got a couple of pictures here that show another project and what that access looks like. Obviously, this is just a road that they've made through the sand dune. There wasn't much of a dune there to begin with. There are projects where they have to plow through a dune and then they have to repair the dune after that's completed. This worked out well because it was at the end of a road that fed into the beach. So, with large trucks and things like that, it was a convenient access point. This is the type of the type of equipment that they're storing down there at that staging area. So they've got a lot of their pipe down there. They got extra buckets for some of their equipment, some anchors, things like that. This is the type of stuff that they would store down there. You've got, next to that big stack of pipes, you've got a piece of equipment that's actually cinching those pipes together. At times, they have all that pipe delivered down there at the beach. They use that area to put a number of different lengths of pipe together. They might create maybe 1,000-foot long segment of pipe, and then they take a bulldozer or a loader and drag that pipe up the beach, and then they hook it into the rest of what they're doing as they need it, as they move the project along. So this is the type of activity that would be going on in the staging area. So one of the things that we talked about, one of the things that we've talked about with the Corps of Engineers is to try to gain some kind of an access point up here to where there could be some staging up here on the northern part of the FRF property, and then obviously access for the equipment to move down the beach and actually construct the project. We had a meeting with the Corps maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, had some discussions. I think Chris had some follow-ups last week with the Corps. Like, I don't know if you want to say anything about that or...
Just to bring the council up to speed, as I turn my microphone. Just to bring the council and everyone else up to speed, we've been in contact with the FRF from the beginning of this project about various issues, everything from easements to the taper to access. Now as we're getting closer, we're starting to get some direction from them on these issues. Ken has already talked about the taper issue. They have concerns about their equipment. Ultimately, we consider that to be a minor issue to overcome and don't expect that to have any major impact. The access piece it came as a bit of I won't say it goes far as to say a shock, but was certainly seemed like a change in direction from where we had been before. And we haven't gotten a no. What we've gotten is can we look at another alternative? Originally, we were talking about direct access, either through the current entrance or constructing an access parallel to the northern boundary of the Corps. Both of those have, for all intents and purposes, been rejected by by the Corps of Engineers. Which leaves us with an issue of how we're going to access the beach for this project. We haven't had a whole lot of time to reconnoiter the area, to come up with some alternatives, but the Corps is willing to look at us using their far northern area, where we would actually come down Spindrift and enter through their property on that far south area. That they're still willing to consider that, although they're not willing to at this point commit to allowing us to do that. There are some other accesses. Again, we don't have any public accesses, so we would have to work with an HOA. We're going to start that process. We ultimately believe that we'll be able to come up with a solution before we get too far down the line, but we're just starting that project now. One of the things that Ken and I have talked about is what exactly is required. That's one of the reasons why he brought the pictures down. And Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, really what we're looking at is when we mobilize, we'll need a place to actually physically get the equipment on the beach. That means there'll be some low boys that'll be coming down the road that'll have the bulldozers and the pipes. We'll offload the pipes, or the contractor will offload the pipes, and then it will remain on the beach unless a storm or something comes up and it has to be taken off again. The trucks won't be staying on the road during that period. They'll go off and do their own thing. So really we're looking at an area where we can physically get onto the beach. It's one of the downsides to 159 Bufflehead having been sold, with a house going up on there, because that would have been a nice area. But and there are some other areas where we're going to need to talk to property owners. One of the things I need to get from Ken is, what an ideal width would be, so we can figure that out. But the first thing we're going to do is look at the Spindrift area and then sort of work our way down from there. And we'll be doing that over the next several weeks or a couple months. So
I've just got a couple more photos to show. These are, again, some shots of that North Topsail Beach project, just to show you some pictures of what one of these projects being constructed looks like. So this is the discharge here. Basically, you got a mix of sand and water, and as that water comes out and the flow is reduced, as it starts spreading out and flowing, the water flows back into the ocean there. They're building up these dikes as they go along the way to allow that water to flow a little further and allow as much as possible that sand to fall out of solution. And then basically they're using these bulldozers to stack the sand up to continue that dike as they go. And as that sand starts to build up here, they're just scraping sand off and moving it over to the side, scraping it up, and then they've got grade stakes out there, and the bulldozers are just trying to pile the sand high enough to meet the grade that's required to build the project. So sounds simple enough. So this is a zoomed in shot of that that slurry there. So we're proposing to use a hopper dredge for the projects up in Dare County. So basically what would happen is that hopper dredge is going to come into shore. It's going to hook into a pipe that'll be floating out there maybe a mile or so offshore, maybe a little closer. Basically, they need to get into about something around 28 to 30 feet of water. So they'll put that within a mile of shore. They'll pull up to that pipe. They'll hook into that pipe, and then it'll take, I don't know, Julian, help me out. How long to unload? I'm sorry?
About 4 to 5 hours.
About 4 to 5 hours to discharge the hopper.
Yeah.
Okay. So that'll be running a little while, and if they've got multiple hopper dredges in the system, maybe it's a short amount of time before they hook the next one up. But I guess my point is that it'll be intermittent. There'll be times that you'll go out there and it won't be running. There'll be times you go out there and it will be running. This is, sometimes they use this, they call this a spreader, so it's kind of a deflector that it's at the end of it. It's kind of like putting your finger on the end of a hose or something like that, but it basically is it's just trying to slow down the velocity of that force. So it goes up in the air, kind of creates a fan, and then the water just kind of falls down. It allows that sand to fall out of the water a little faster. This is a good shot of what it looks like them constructing the dunes down there. So this dune here is being constructed to an elevation of plus 14 feet. This is a very similar slope to the slope that we're proposing for your project. So it gives a good feel of what one of those dunes look like as it's being constructed. There's a lot of questions about what happens to access points when the dunes are constructed. So this is a good shot of kind of what that looks like. The operators are pretty good. They're pretty used to working out there in proximity to these types of structures. Things get broken from time to time, but they're aware that if they break a set of steps or something, that it's on them. They've got to repair it. Basically, you're looking at burying the lower parts of the steps. Maybe putting a little sand off to the side where over time the wind is going to spread that sand out and it'll achieve the grade that we set out to achieve. During the construction process, we'll have construction observers out at the site at all times. It says 24 hours on call at site. I mean, sometimes things go wrong in the middle of the night and wake our folks up, but we'll have somebody that's actually staying here in town on the beach that's out there multiple times a day doing site visits, talking to the contractors, personnel, basically just making sure that they're complying with the permits and that the design is being met. They'll be doing some sediment monitoring out there, maybe some sampling depending on the permit conditions. They'll be looking at dredge compliance. They'll be reviewing the records that come back from the dredge every day and making sure that they're not outside of their their dredging areas. There'll be a daily report that's submitted to town staff every day. It'll have pictures and reports of any important conversations that took place and a checklist of all the things that were checked on that specific day. Coordination with the contractors, reviewing pay requests when those pay requests come in. We'll take a look at them and sign off as the engineer. Handling any kind of change orders that might come up, and then providing a project completion report at the end of the project. So as far as where we are with schedule, as I mentioned, as far as the offshore sand search, the engineering analysis, the environmental documentation, the drafts of the environmental documents have been submitted. The time clock has started with the Corps of Engineers and BOEM coordinating with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries Service. All the reports that we had, all the environmental documents that we had proposed to submit at this point in time have been submitted. At this point, we're on schedule to have those permits in hand sometime November, December of this year. So we're on track to try to bid this project out around the end of this year, being in a position to open bids either right before the new year or possibly in early January, and then looking to award a contract probably sometime in the middle of February, which will give the contractor plenty of time to do their pre-construction coordination and have things here whenever they want to start. Again, the plan all along is we're working towards this 12-month construction period, so that the contractor, if they want to start, in April, they can start in April and have from April to build the project. We haven't talked about, any specific. At this point, we want to leave it up to the contractor. If they want to build Duck first and then go build the other two together, or if they want to bring 3 different dredges in and be building them all at once, we want to leave the flexibility up to them to try to get, the best price for it. So at this point in time, all we know is that we're trying to provide them a 12-month window to build the project. And as we get closer to bidding out the project and actually opening bids and assessing bids, we'll have a better idea of the order of construction that the contractor is looking to perform. All right, so with that, before I open it up with questions, I meant to do this in the beginning, but I've got Julian DeVis with me today. He is new to our Wilmington office, but he's been with the company for 5-6 years, something like that. If you guys think you're cold today, he just moved up in November from Southwest Florida, around the Naples area. So he was actually working in our office in Boca Raton. But once we get into construction, Julian will probably be managing more of the construction. Certainly the construction oversight. He'll be the guy on the ground out here, and so you'll be seeing a lot more of Julian as we get it more and more into the construction phase. So I want to trying to bring him up to Dare County as much as possible learn the folks, learn the faces, and understand the projects, have a real good grasp on the project by the time we get going. So, but with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Can I have a question? I understand the need to do the surveying now before the bids go out so that people will be able to bid properly. But if we had a significant erosion event, either because of a storm this summer or next winter, will they have to survey again before they would commence with the actual work?
Right, so this survey is going to tell us the actual project that we're going to bid out. We're going to give them an estimated cubic yardage. When part of their bid will be to, when they come in, they will survey the beach, like for this North Topsail Beach project that we had. Construction was proposed to start around the first week of December. They came in about the middle of November and did a whole survey of the entire project area. And they said, you know, they gave us the survey data, and to the benefit of North Topsail Beach, the whole project's like 1.2 million cubic yards, and it actually showed that they had accreted about 100,000 cubic yards. So the cost actually went down for that project. But yeah, there'll be adjustments that are made. I mean, since we're dealing with sand on the beach, I mean, there's a certain amount of flex that we have if we have to contract the project a little bit, if we want to expand the project a little bit, that's all within reason. If there was a huge storm event or something significant, you know, we'd have to step back and take a look and see, you know, what are the conditions. But anything that, you know, sort of the normal nor'easters, the normal seasonal erosion that you would get, that's kind of built into the process. So they give us that original survey of the whole area. If we have to make some adjustments to the design at that point in time, we can make some adjustments. And then as they're building the project, they're surveying maybe 500 feet in advance. And so they survey those profiles, they build the project and resurvey them, and then those two surveys are used to determine how much sand they placed on the beach. That's how you pay for it, based on those surveys.
So I have another question, if it's okay. So you may have answered it. So do they work in about 500-foot segments? Is that roughly sort of the chunks that they work in? So the steps that you showed us of the pipe and the sand being dumped out and the dredging and the bulldozing, it's taken in chunks. It's just repeated over and over and over again.
Correct. And they'll from day to day, they'll close off an area in front of them and an area behind them. And usually, if they're continuously pumping, usually that area, any given section of area, shouldn't be closed for, you know, more than maybe 2 or 3 days, something like that. I mean, this project right now, it's not unusual for them to move 200, 250 feet in a day. So a 500-foot area is only impacted, you know, for 2 or 3 days, something like that.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And that staging area would move with them as they were going.
That staging area actually stayed at the is a static position at the far south end of the project. And that's basically where they bring stuff onto the beach. There is quite an entourage that travels with the project. They've got a shack that sits there on the beach where they can go in, and it's basically a mobile office. They got welding machines out there. They've got lights out there, fuel tanks and things like that. So there's a pretty big amount of stuff that moves with the project as they go down the beach.
But again, that's on the beach. So once we get it on the beach, unless there's a storm or some other condition that causes them to have to take it off the beach, it stays on the beach and moves with them.
Can you, excuse me, you're proposing a 12-month window for the contractor to do this job. Is that been included in the permit request that we have?
Correct. So that is in the permit request. All the environmental documentations have requested that.
And we feel comfortable that will go through?
We do feel comfortable. I mean, we're in the lee of the Nags Head project, which that's about the same way that they did it. Obviously, it took them a little bit more inertia to get it through, but we're using all the same arguments, all the same factors applied to these projects as they did in the Nags Head project, sea conditions and things like that. So, I mean, there's been a big push throughout the state and probably throughout the region to try to push in and get these windows extended, so it's not going to come as a shock to the agencies to see it. We feel like we've done our due diligence. We've made all the right arguments to make this. And the Corps and BOEM are just now starting to get into the coordination. So over the next couple of months, we'll get a better feel of specifically things that they might ask for if in fact they're going to. It's basically the National Marine Fisheries Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service who, that's basically their bread and butter to protect those resources that could potentially be impacted by a year-round dredging window. So they're going to be the agencies that are most involved in the discussion.
But the problem isn't the dredging, it's the work on the beach, isn't it?
It's more placement of sand on the beach than it is out offshore. I mean, we're going to be using hopper dredges, which historically have been thought of as being a little bit more of a nuisance, just the way that the thing moves along the bottom, more of a nuisance to turtles. I mean, they have devices on those on the suction on the bottom to try to exclude turtles out of it and make sure that they that nothing's entrained. But historically, usually they look at those projects that use hopper dredges, and they want to make sure they have all the safety aspects in place. What we're anticipating and what we proposed in the environmental documents is that the dredge will actually have a trawler in front of it, basically just dragging chains along the bottom, so that if there's a turtle down there that's sitting in the sand, that those will wake them up enough to move out of the way before the dredge comes in behind them. That's a pretty standard practice that was used for the Nag's Head project as well.
Ken, are you, I noticed we were talking about the access on the beach, and is it always a given that the project goes from south to north for these type of things?
No.
So you can start in the middle or you start at one end or the other, or what,
Yeah, it's kind of it would be dictated by the contractor. They'll tell us where to set it up. For that North Topsail Beach project, it was tying into, it was because of where the borrow area was, and we were tying in, or we were going to build down to a town limit. There were some specific reasons why we asked them to start at the north at a specific spot and go south. It's not something that I've thought about for the duck project. I think we would just let them, give them the opportunity, excuse me, to build it either from south to north or north to south.
just thinking of access issues. And just one other question, if I could, while I've got you. The 20-foot wide duck project, the top dune is going to be 20 feet wide, and then it'll go at a 5-to-1 slope, I think you said, and then it's going to go out 60 feet at the dry beach.
Correct.
And then it's going to kind of erode from there and do what it's going to do. That's the final?
That's the final. Right?
Okay.
After it's
Final.
after it's eroded over
eroded.
5 years, that's what should be. And the idea is that we came up with a design that provides you a certain level of protection, and we don't want that design just there in year one. We want that design there all the way through the cycle.
5 years,
so we
right.
put enough material in front of that design so that after the cycle, you're back to just the design and no more advanced fill.
So on that 20-foot, thank you for clarifying that. So the 20-foot wide top dune, if you will, how much do you look for that to erode? Obviously, it's not being impacted by the water, like the dry beach areas. Do you guys monitor that too? And statistically, are you just looking at wind taking that, or what happens to that 20-foot wide?
When we do the beach profile surveys, we survey all the way up and over top of the dune, and you'll be able to look at 2 different traces over time to see if maybe it's building out, maybe they put sand fencing out there, or whatever it's doing, we'll be able to monitor how that dune is changing over time. But ideally, the dune wouldn't be impacted as far as the water and things like that.
Right.
You're not looking for the waves to get up to that dune.
Okay, thanks.
Just a couple things. One, speaking of the dunes, I mean, that's one of the things that makes our project very distinct, as Ken pointed out, from Kitty Hawk's project, in the sense that there's the beach nourishment kind of project, and then there's also the storm damage reduction project. We also have the storm damage reduction piece of this, which is where the dune comes in. So when you have that run up, when you raise your profile and you have the berm and you've built the dry beach, extended the dry beach, you're gonna decrease the force of that run up when it gets to the end. That dune is going to be the final piece that'll stop that from causing a lot of problems. Again, this is designed for the Isabel level storm. Beyond that, it became unaffordable for us to do. So we tried to extend it as much as we could. We're using sort of the Isabel level because most of us were here for that. We understand what that kind of storm was. And so we're certainly getting, as far as design is concerned, more bang for our buck in terms of storm damage reduction. Another point I would make is if you have the stomach and Malox to read comments in the Outer Banks Voice, underneath articles, and so you read, about the Nags Head Beach Nourishment Project and, and all the experts who say that the project isn't working. They're wrong. The project is working as it was designed to work. That 60 foot is the design dry beach, and then as Ken has pointed out, and we don't show the nice graphic that they have shown before. You have additional sand out in front of it, which is designed to be eroded. It is designed to be eroded over 5 years. So when that beach is originally put in, while it's a 60-foot dry berm that's designed to be there at the end of 5 years, when it first goes in, it may look like it's 100 or 150 feet, depending on the area. But that's going to erode away. That's what it's supposed to do. So I just try to put that in, plant that seed so everyone knows what we're talking about here. It's interesting, as I've talked to the chamber, and I haven't sprung this on Ken, but at some point I want to get Ken in there to talk to the chamber and whoever else so that there is an understanding across the board of what a beach nourishment project is, because there seems to be a little bit of disconnect with that.
Ken, your design assumes that if we had an Isabel storm, we would lose beach but not dune?
No,
Lose both.
The way that design works is if the Isabel storm, if the Isabel storm is simulated in that S beach right now, there are, I don't know, maybe 50 or some houses along the project area where that impact line actually intersects those houses on the beach. If we put this design in and we run that same simulation with the same characteristics of the Isabel storm, we end up with something like 6 houses. So it's that reduction in that line in the sand, if you will, that we're drawing that says this is where the impact line is. Without the project, we're impacting X number of structures. With the project, we're able to reduce that to something far less.
It does assume that there will be a loss of dune with that size storm.
Yeah, I mean, everything out there is put there to be a buffer between the houses and the storm. So if that actual design storm happens, yes, we would assume that some of that dune is going to get chewed up. The concept is that the house isn't getting chewed up, that the dune is getting chewed up.
Well, because that's what happened with Isabel.
Correct.
Unfortunately, it was about 40, 45 feet of dune.
Anybody in the audience like to ask Ken a question? Joe?
I'm sure this number's been thrown around, but if you could repeat it quickly, I would appreciate it. If you start the project and have good weather and there's no other hang-ups, about how many days would it take you to complete our project?
It is the number that we have. I don't have it with me.
Secret number, right?
No, it's not a secret number. I'm sure. Well, I know it's in the environmental documentation because they want to know how long the dredge is going to be out there. I'd have to get back to you on that.
If you go by your 250 feet a day, you're probably looking at 40 days, and
Yeah,
that doesn't sound like
250
enough.
is when they're running really strong. So I mean, I want to say that this project is something like right around 1 million cubic yards. And I think for the project that we're doing down in North Topsail Beach, granted it's a little different dredge, we're assuming something like on the average, like 12,000 cubic yards a day or something like that. But I'd want to check to see, as far as the hopper dredges, what their rated discharge is per day, to make sure that it was
And this
accurate.
project will be started in what month again?
We
If it works.
want to give the contractor, we don't know when this specific project will be started. We want to give the contractor a 12-month window so that they've got maximum flexibility. If they want to start in June and try to bring in multiple vessels and build all 3 of these projects in the nicest part of the weather condition, granted that's maximum tourist season, we want to allow them to have that flexibility. The other thing is that so many areas along the East Coast and along the entire coast are dictated by when you can build these projects, having to build them in the wintertime when turtles aren't in the water and they're not nesting on the beach, that these guys tend to have a lot more capacity to do work outside of that window. Like right now, we're building that North Topsail Beach project. It's the winter. It's bad weather. They get shut down for 2 days, and then they come in and they pump for 12 hours, and then they get shut down for another 2 days. And that's the way they're used to working, because most projects require them to build in the wintertime. So if we can get this extension, this ability to construct year-round, the climate of bidding should be much better. And that's what we saw at Nags Head. Well, we didn't see. That's what the town of Nags Head took advantage of.
But when they start Duck or Kitty Hawk or Little Hills, there would be no interruption other than weather. In other words, they wouldn't bail out and go to another location and then come back here to do some more work and then bail out.
That would be one of the things that would drive that price down, is having the flexibility. If something came up, I'll give you an example. We were doing some projects a few years ago, and the oil spill happened down in Louisiana. And the governor of Louisiana came up with a plan to use sand that was, that had already been mapped and permitted, to build these berms of sand, these berms or these sand berms in front of the barrier islands out there to keep the oil from going up into the marsh. And so all the money was coming from BP. They were able to basically take the entire, Eastern Coast dredging fleet and bring them to Louisiana. It was all under emergencies. But we were building projects at that time, and the contractor came to the project manager and said, "Can you release this dredge to us for 2 months so we can go over here and make more money, and then we'll come back here and do this?" So if they have that out there, that if something comes up, that they could go do another job and still come back and build your job, knowing they have that flexibility gives you, it should translate into cost savings. You should get a better unit price knowing that they can do that. And we would have all the specs in place to make sure that, things that wash away while they're gone, you're not double paying for any volume.
Okay, I was going to say that could be a double-edged sword. If
sure, no,
part of the project gets damaged in something, and then who comes
Sure.
back and pays for that?
Yep,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
Ken, do we have clearance for summer dredging, or is that still an open issue?
It is an open issue. So all of these documents have been submitted to the Corps and BOEM, and they are now doing the coordination with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service. But we've given them all the time that, BOEM and the Corps of Engineers said that, we need to give them to make sure that they can get everything worked out.
Good.
No, this kind of leading a little bit, bringing up what he's bringing up, but are they allowed to leave when we have like a 2-month window left to finish the project and come back? And then what happens if they can't get it done in the time permitted with the permits? Are we gonna have to wait to go through a whole permitting process to get the dredge back online, and we have to pay for all those costs?
No, I mean, it all comes down to the way that the specs are written, the specifications are written, what kind of agreements they have in that contract. And we're still in the process, or that's the contract that the county will probably approve in March. So we'll be working on those specifications, thinking through some of these possibilities, giving them that 12-month window to make sure that the safety checks are in place, that that they wouldn't be released, and obviously there are things like liquidated damages and things like that would make them want to come back and finish the project up. But those are all details that have yet to been worked out, but things that will be kept in mind.
Second thing was, when they measure the sand for survey, are we paying for what they take from the ocean bottom, or actually what they place on the beach?
It'll be what they actually place on the beach is what will be paid. Different projects require different things. If they tend to you tend to get a lower cost if you survey what's been dug, because they know that they're going to get paid for just what they dug, and when they put it on the beach, some of it's going to wash away. So sometimes you get a higher unit cost, but they always say if you want a hole, pay for a hole. If you want a beach, pay for a beach. So we on our beach projects where the goal is to build a specific design, we always pay based on the actual volume that's placed on the beach, and that's what they'll be bidding on. They'll be basing their bid on getting a cubic yard of sand onto the beach, not getting it out of the hole in the ground.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Ken, just from an information standpoint, what happens when the sand is pulled from the sandbar? When all the sand is pulled, what happens to the sandbar? What does it look like?
Sure. The cuts that we're dredging into, so we got kind of a shoal system out there that they'll be mining the sand from. The cuts are anywhere from maybe like 4 feet deep to maybe 10 feet deep out there. I don't have the exact information in front of me, but the natural angle that the sand will hold out there in the ocean. I mean, if you were a scuba diver out there and you were swimming, it wouldn't look like a sheer face or a cliff that dropped down into it. It'd be kind of a gentle slope down into it. What we see over time is where you've got a flat bottom and you dig a borrow area, is that you really don't see a whole lot of recharge of that borrow area because it's so far offshore that unless you're in a really hurricane sort of wave conditions, the sand on the bottom is not moving around out there. These shoals that they are elevated off of the seafloor some, but they're still out in 40 to 45 feet of water. So the same kind of thing. You wouldn't expect to see a whole lot of fill in of those areas over time. It's something that the contractor will be surveying as they go. They'll have surveys when they're done with the project to show that they didn't go outside the dredge area. But it's something that at times have been monitored over times. But in those areas where these borrow areas have continuously been monitored, standard practice is you don't see a whole lot of recharge in those areas of the sand.
Just a follow-up question. Who actually lets the contract? Is it the town of Duck or Dare County?
For this arrangement, what we've discussed so far is that the county will let the contract with the contractor. And that's what I talked about, that MOA and MOU in place, so that everybody understands roles and responsibilities, how the money's going to be paid back. But that's the idea, that the theory behind it is that the contractor would much rather deal with one entity than deal with 3 different entities. So, that's a question.
Ken, is there a minimum number of qualified bidders that can bid, or how many bidders qualified would you expect would bid on the project?
Sure. The minimum number of bids. Typically, a public works project that's led by a local government has to have 3 bids. So we have had projects at times that have gone through the process and they've gone through the bidding process. We usually advertise for about 30 days. That's enough time for the dredgers to get all the information together, read the packet. But there have been times where we might only get 2 contractors to come back. So we actually have to rebid it. Usually it's a 2-week process to rebid it. And then after that, I believe the local government statute allows for you to potentially let the contract after that rebid has occurred. We've been in discussions with contractors that are capable of building this project for probably 6 or 9 months now. So we know of at least 4 contractors that are definitely know that it's coming down the pipe and are trying to plan for it accordingly. So a project of this scale, especially if they have a 12-month window, I would imagine we'll get a lot of competition on that one.
Thank you.
Sure, sir.
Are there ever public safety concerns with the staging or the actual construction? And if there are public safety concerns, how are they addressed?
Sure. I mean, it's a pretty standard practice. So the specifications that we use are specifications that we've been using for 20 years and are constantly, when we see something new that we hadn't seen before, we're refining those specifications. The contractors, most of them are big companies. They're very safety oriented. They're looking to go the extra mile to make sure things are safe. The actual area that they'll be working in will be, will have some kind of a construction barrier there so that people can't walk through the actual active area. The pipe, which a lot of times is running along shore outside of the area that they're working in, usually they're obligated to build sand ramps over that pipe at certain stipulated intervals so that people can walk up and over the pipe. They don't have to climb over it. Anything like that. People are monitoring the pipe to make sure the pipe's not leaking or anything like that. I mean, on the beach, those are the primary safety issues that we're usually looking at. Julian, can you think of something else that jumps out at you?
You said the most of it. There's an active construction zone where no one's allowed in except them, and anyone that does go in, you need the proper PPE, hard hat, all of that, steel-toed shoes. But besides that, yeah, you have the pipe running down the beach with the sand ramps, but there really aren't too many issues with safety with the general public. I mean, the big one is obviously people trying to get in near the discharge, get a closer look, pick up shells, this and that. But there's both fencing on both sides of that active construction zone, and people typically on the beach from the company just there to make sure that people don't cross those fences.
Is there at night as well?
It's 24/7. Yep.
I think that answers your question.
Okay.
They don't pump at night, do they?
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Hey, Julian, just along those same lines, how do you maintain people from the houses accessing the beach in those areas?
Same thing. There's caution tape on each of those dune overwalks. Obviously, it's a little harder to keep them out, but same thing. They have those same safety personnel. There's typically 10 to 15 people from the company on the beach. If anybody sees anybody, they all know no one's allowed in there. Like Ken said, they're very used to this. They have it down, very well, and they do everything they can to keep people out.
Thank you.
I got one more thing. Go ahead.
It's not working, but monitoring the turtles. In Nag said they had monitors that for the nesting turtles that came in during the night because they were doing it in the summertime. Will you have some kind of facility for that?
Yeah, we definitely anticipate, and it's part of the mitigation plan that we submit when we ask for permission to do this year-round dredging, that there'll be monitors every morning that will have to be out before the crews start running bulldozers and things like that. So before they start moving to a new area or something like that, or if traffic is actually coming up, sometimes they'll bring a bulldozer from the staging area. The contractor will know that they can't be moving equipment up and down the beaches until the inspector has gone out there, driven the beach, marked any nests that are out there. That's usually the standard practice. And then in the actual work area, like Julian said, you've got 10 or 15 people working under lights. I mean, if a turtle came up into that environment, I mean, everybody would know it immediately.
What Nags had did is they paid people to walk the beach during the night for when the turtles came in, so we could move the nest right away.
Typically in a lot of the beach communities that we work in, there is some kind of a local volunteer organization that is trained, that does that kind of stuff. I believe that's the case up here. I don't know if specifically in Duck. I know that our environmental folks that have written these documents have coordinated with those volunteer groups, and they're able to perform those daily monitoring. Oh, great. Maybe they've discussed that with you.
No, they haven't so far that I know of. But
I will get your contact information.
okay.
John?
You talked about the bid process, about you're trying to give the company as much flexibility as possible on how they do it. But when they give you that bid, are there more details in it? Like they say, we're going to do all three at once, we're going to do what you have. What kind of details do you have coming with that bid? Just more thinking along the lines of, we have to plan for when this is going to affect our beaches and those those areas.
Sure. Given the complexity of these three projects, I think what we will ask them to do when they submit their bid is to submit a work plan, nothing down to the hour, down to the day, but basically an order of construction and general months that they're looking at bidding it, so that, if two bids are fairly close, it may be something that everybody wants to take a look at to see, how they're going to spread it out, how they're going to order things. But I think that's probably something that we would include as a request in that bid package, that they provide a general work plan of the order that they would construct the projects.
That'd be great to help with our PR side of things.
Typically, you ask for the actual dredge that's scheduled to do the work. So we should have a pretty good idea if they're looking to bring in multiple dredges, or they're going to string the same dredge out for the whole 12 months to try to do one project.
Any other questions for Ken? Ken, thank you very much.
Sure, thank
you.
you.
Great update as always.
Julian, welcome. It's usually not this tall.
I hope not.
No, it's cold.